This episode is brought to you by the Clifford Still Museum. Discover big art and new perspectives at the Clifford Still Museum. Experience the critically acclaimed exhibition, Tell Clifford I Said Hi, on view now through May 10th. Enjoy upcoming events at the museum, including First Friday Pay What You Wish days, monthly meditation sessions, guided tours, film screenings, infant art crawls, and more. During your visit to the Still, find a world-class collection gifted to the city of Denver, award-winning architecture, and a welcoming place for everyone to relax and recharge. The Still is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m., Tuesday through Sunday. Children 17 and under are always free. Buy tickets and learn more at cliffordstillmuseum.org. Today on CityCast Denver. Thanks to multiple bonds passed by Denver voters, the Sloan's Lake Boathouse is getting a makeover, and the lake itself is getting $5 million for ecological restoration work. But this popular body of water that has long struggled with sediment buildup and toxic algae blooms needs a lot more help, to the tune of possibly tens of millions of dollars. So we're revisiting my conversation from last summer with Kurt Weaver, Executive Director of the Sloan's Lake Park Foundation, to understand what it would take to get Sloan's Lake ecologically back on track. Today is Thursday, February 12th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about. Kurt Weaver, welcome to CityCast Denver.
Thanks, Bree. Appreciate you having us on.
So I heard recently that Sloan's Lake's signature event, the annual Dragon Boat Festival, is probably going to have to leave over health and safety concerns with the water. What exactly is the problem?
Yeah, it's tough news to hear for sure. For this year, it's been moved to a later date. And for the next few years, we've been told it's going to have to stay at that later date. But within the next few to several years, it's going to have to find a new home if we don't do something about the lake. We have a couple of issues that we're running into. Some of it is naturally occurring. Some of it is human-made. But the lake is basically filling in. Every Mountain West lake is filling in with sediment over time. It just so happens that Sloan's Lake is filling in a little faster than others are due to it was just a filled-in farm field. So Farmer Sloan, when he popped the aquifer, it just filled in his farm field. It was never really contoured into a human-made lake. And so that compounds the problem because it doesn't have natural flow to keep it healthy. Then, of course, 150 years of development from Sloan's Lake west up to mountains, up into Jeffco, Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, greater Denver. All of that has run off into Sloan's Lake. So there's still 23 unfiltered storm drains and 2 big ditches that flow into the lake even today. So what you see on the streets around Sloan's Lake is going to end up in the lake after a rain or after somebody has watered their lawn. So it's a challenge that we're running into to where the lake is now down to just over 3 feet deep on average. It's a 177-acre lake wide, and so it's a very wide lake. It's a very shallow lake that equals really hot water with no oxygen. And then compound that with phosphorus that flows in there from dog poop and grass clippings and fertilizers. And we end up where we are today, which is basically during the summer months, you should not be around the lake or in the lake due to the blue-green algae. And the fish know this as well. They turn up dead usually at least once a year because there's no oxygen left in there. So all that together is where the city rightfully doesn't want the danger of dragon boats being in there or anybody being in there as to the health hazard that could cause.
I'm just thinking about, this is the first time I've grown up here my whole life, and I did not fully understand how this lake was created and why that is inherently part of its issue. I mean, obviously now it's bad. It's getting bad. It's getting worse. But why now? If the city has known this the whole time, it wasn't designed to be a lake. Are we just at the point where a point of no return?
I think it's been known all along, but honestly, after, the lake was sprung and formed in 1861. So we had 100 years before the first consideration of water quality at government or policy levels. They weren't thinking about those kinds of things for a long time. It looked beautiful. It was wonderful. It was a place where everybody recreated. So there wasn't, quote unquote, a problem. But I think like lots of things, we realized maybe our methodology back then was not the best. We did not think this stuff through. So I think the issue was without formation of nice deep areas where there's cold water on the bottom that naturally then resurfaces. That's the kind of thing you need in these lakes. And so it's a challenge of without the proper contouring, and then of course not an eye to what's going in that lake, including through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, some hot cars We had a Cessna that landed in there when it ran out of gas. They have unfortunately pulled some individuals out there that are no longer with us. So it was a challenging time for the lake in lots of different ways. But I think that's where, without the eye to creating it and then continually maintaining it over those last 100 years, the people today are stuck with a much larger problem. And so that's where I credit to the Parks and Rec staff. They keep that lake as good as it is, but they are, fingers in a dam at this point.
So you discussed sort of like how the lake was built is part of the problem. You said also the sediment and the run, just everything that comes into the lake from the surrounding environment is part of the problem. Climate change, I'm assuming, is part of this problem. What is the worst case scenario if nothing can change, if nothing happens, nothing changes versus outside of what the city is basically just trying to do to keep it going right now?
Yeah, worst case is the creature from the Sloan's Lake Lagoon comes crawling out. No, I think worst case scenario is a stagnated lake. And I think that's not something that is out of the realm of possibility. Now, again, it's not this year. It's not next year. It's within the next several years. But like you said, it's only going to keep getting hotter. We're not going to have a break on that. And again, with the lake filling in, it's only going to get more shallow. So it is a compounding problem that we will run into. Now, stagnated lakes, and once a lake stagnates, it becomes a whole lot more expensive and a whole lot more of a headache to fix than a lake that is still on the cusp as to where it is now. And that's why we're really leaning into this work today, is that we don't want to get to that point. To your point, it is a climate mess. Stagnating water, especially its size that we have at this lake, is a climate emergency in that it is a massive methane producer. And so that's another one of those things to where if you allow a lake to stagnate, it becomes the number one methane producer we will have in the city of Denver. Because again, it's a 177 acre wide methane producing area that's not good for us. So that's another thing we need to make sure it does not get to that point. So I think it's a challenge to say this, but stagnation is something that is bad in 100 ways. There's a bunch of ways to fix the lake now in smaller fashion, but there really is only one, which is to remove the sediment to get deeper, colder water, which holds oxygen better, which holds fish better, which moves and then recycles water better. It takes care of sediment better, all of those things. So deep, cold water is the solution to almost every lake's problem in the Mountain West, but especially Sloan's Lake.
So that removing that sediment, if we didn't do that, the lake would basically just fill up with that and then just become like a goopy sediment pile that produces methane. So what would that, I imagine the implications are terrible, but what would that mean for the surrounding neighborhood? Again, if nothing was able to be done, because we'll talk about the cost of this in a little bit,
Sure.
but what does that mean for the people, especially that live around it?
Yeah, Sloan's Lake is certainly, it's such an important thing for West Denver and Northwest Denver. It is the third most used park in the city system. And certainly, as we know, people in Denver don't tend to cross 25 to recreate for some reason. So it's so vital to that community's health. It's also what we call the, kind of the HQ for the regional parks in the area. So that Parks and Rec staff and that resources that come out of the Sloan's Lake Park take care of all the other parks around there. So it's got an immense amount of importance there, not just the historical value and all the stories I can tell you about Roger the Elephant and everything else, but truly for today, it is still the anchor of that community and needs to be kept healthy.
This episode is brought to you by Denver Health. February is Heart Month, and at Denver Health, heart rhythm care is becoming safer and less invasive. Heart rhythm problems like atrial fibrillation, ventricular tachycardia, sudden cardiac arrest, or heartbeats that are too slow can affect your health and quality of life. Denver Health provides advanced treatment for patients with irregular heart rhythms, and their team offers safe, effective, and compassionate care to help patients live a healthier life. Cardiologists on the cardiac electrophysiology team are now using leadless pacemakers to treat dangerous pauses in the heartbeat. Unlike traditional pacemakers, these tiny devices sit completely inside the heart. There are no wires and no surgical pockets under the skin. This means a smoother procedure and fewer potential complications, which can make a big difference for patients. Denver Health works closely with every patient to create a personalized plan that meets their needs, focusing on safety, comfort, and long-term results. Learn more at denverhealth.org/EP. That's denverhealth.org/EP. Let's talk about what may be next or where we are, and again, what this will cost. So on Monday, City Council approved the Vibrant Denver bond package, which includes $5 million for Sloan's Lake. If voters approve the bond in November, what could that $5 million do?
Yeah, we're so happy this happened. I know bond issues can be contentious, but we're really happy that we got into this bond. We started at $40 million. The project was $40 million originally, and it got cut down to 5. So it was certainly a different project then. And I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like now because it's been cut down so far. So we will be adjusting, and we'll be working with the Parks and Rec department in the city to make sure, it gets spent in hopefully the ways that we want to see it. But right now it's for quote unquote aquatic and environmental interventions. That will include, so the 23 storm drains that are unfiltered flowing in right now, likely getting some level of filtration on those, stopping some of that sediment from coming in. The 2 big ditches, there's one on the north and the south on the west side of the lake that come basically through Edgewater. Those ditches are the biggest contributors of sediment. So getting those filtered in some way. And when I say filtered, don't think of your air conditioner filter. It's not a piece of paper that, everything runs, or a coffee strainer. This is filtration. A lot of times that means native plants planted in there. More of a swamp looking area is a filter for a lake. It takes out a lot of the bad stuff on the way in. Or then things like a forebay, which is basically like a deep little pool before the water flows into the lake, where the water flows in, sediment settles there, then the clean water flows into the lake, and we dig the sediment out of just that one little hole. And we can keep doing that over time, and that's okay. So things like that is what will be contributed to. We're also deeply hoping that in that $5 million is a significant amount set aside for planning the much larger project, which is sediment removal. And truly, sediment removal is the only thing that will get this lake back to health in any real way for the long term.
Let's talk about that, because you just mentioned originally the ask was $40 million for what sounds like a much bigger project. Practically, what would it take to literally remove that goopy sediment? Like, what is the plan, hopefully, for this larger vision of saving the lake?
Yeah, we worked with an engineering crew, and we worked with the city's contractors to learn as much as we can. We estimate it's about $130 million to dredge the lake and to get the sediment out.
Oh,
and
wow.
That would include, now, a big chunk of that cost is removal of the sediment and where it has to then go. You have to place all this stuff somewhere else. If we can partner with a project, let's say Cronky's new big purchase down on the lakefront, if they need to raise that ground by 6 or 8 feet in certain areas, that's perfect fill coming out of Sloan's Lake to fill that in. If DIA needs a new runway, this would be perfect to put right under there to level that ground. So looking for like projects is an important part of this to make sure that we can hopefully offset some of those costs. Because if they pay for the transportation of the sediment, that helps us a whole lot to lower that cost. So there's partnerships in this that do make some sense. But the $130 million is part of it to get the sediment out. We have to move upriver to make sure this doesn't continue to happen. We have to make sure the storm drains are taken care of. We have to reroute some and filter some. We have to make sure the shorelines are remade in the way that is most healthy for the lake to stay healthy. Native plants can't just be on the shoreline or in the water. They have to be within 20 feet of the water to really do the filtration of all the runoff going in there. So there's all kinds of things like that, including the birds and the fish and the other environmental considerations that are in there. So there's a whole list. And again, credit to the Parks and Rec. They've done this in 8 different categories of interventions that are needed to get the lake back to health. That's more like a north of $150, $200 million project if you look at it overall. So that's a large scale project, and it's not next year. It's the next 10, 15 years, right? But I think the sediment removal part of it is really what we as a foundation are focused on, because it's the biggest, frankly, least sexy thing. It's not like it tomorrow, if I dredged it and it was back there, it still looks the same on the surface. So it's not like it's a huge intervention that people are going to realize. It's not a new playground they get to play on. And that's why we as a foundation are really leaning into that work, because it's what has to happen to make sure it's there.
So you're talking long-term, like $130 million, upwards of that. You're a foundation. This is a Parks and Rec, project. This is a piece of the city that taxpayers definitely have a stake in. Politically, is there a strategy for getting the rest of that money?
There is. There's a couple of them. I think it kind of depends on the tenor of what we're dealing with at this point. If it was this week and we walked into the mayor's office and said, hey, how about another $130 million? What do you think? We know the answer that's going to come, and it's rightfully. There's a lot of other projects and priorities. Housing is a huge thing that we know we are probably behind in the line of importance. So there's absolutely some priorities that you've got to get it right on timing. This is also not just a Denver issue. This is an issue of Edgewater, Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, Jeffco. Potentially, as you then go up the ladder, the Mile High Flood District deals with the 8 counties in the area there. And that's an issue. This is their floodplain. So this Sloan's Lake is a floodplain. It can raise 2.5 feet and handle that much flooding before then it flows out of the park. So it is a floodplain for FEMA and for Mile High Flood District. Both of those organizations have a stake in it and have dollars to spend on these kinds of projects. Dottie and Department of Infrastructure and Transportation, they kind of govern these kind of big projects. They work with them and they usually lead the way on these. They would have a stake in this. USDA, there's cow runoff as you go up the lake or up the rivers that then flow into the lake. There's cow runoff at some point when you go up there. The EPA, if it still exists tomorrow, they're of course going to have an issue, and a stake in this. And so that's one of those where we've actually gone pretty far down the road on an EPA loan. And then we're told, well, after this last election, we're not sure what's going to be available. So that's one where we're going to continue to work with the federal government, state government, local governments, and as well, any community organization out there, any foundation out there that we can go and find some of these dollars, because it's no one person's responsibility, but it can't be none of our responsibility. And I think that's where we as the foundation see ourselves as the political will and the people who won't stop knocking on the door and poking people in the back to say, hey, let's keep on this. And that's our job. And then I think we've already done a pretty good job. We put together what's called the Sloan's Lake Watershed Alliance. That includes all the regional municipalities, the federal government individuals, Hickenlooper and Bennett's individuals, their staff sit on this. Brittany's Peterson and Diana DeGette and all those individuals have put folks on there. So a lot of people are already weighing in to then be a solution here. But it's going to take every one of us opening up the pocketbook a bit to say, we know we have responsibility here. Let's take care of this and make sure it's there for generations to come.
So you mentioned that organization, the group of folks coming together, this committee. So does that mean that all of these counties and organizations and municipalities are fully they have a stake in this? It's not just like you hope that they have a stake in it.
I won't say fully in. They're currently attending the meetings and the phone calls. So they keep showing up. And that's at this point, when we're in this stage early on, that's all I can ask of them. At some point, there will be an ask, and they'll have to be, which is, hey, now we have a number. So the $130 million is the estimation. We have to do some more testing and know how much actually has to come out of there. And do you drain the whole lake at once, or do you drain it in 10% and then just clean that part out and then another 10%? There's lots of ways to do this. So once we have a final project idea in place, and that's what we're working through right now, that's where we'll get into, okay, now we all know what the final number is. We've got to raise that number. And the nice part about long-term debt, like the bond that's happening right now, is you don't need the money today in the bank. You need the ability to get the money over the next 10, 15, 20 years through all the different ways that you're doing it. But you could still get the full check today if you have the repayment options ready to go. And so that's where we feel confident that with all of those people involved and all of them echoing the same thing, which is we love the lake, we love the history, we don't want it to go away. It's so important to us. We believe that we can get to the goal of that big number, even though that is a scary number. Frankly, as you hear the budgets, the federal level being thrown, tossed about, it's not that scary of a number when you think about those levels and those numbers.
So you mentioned the EPA, and I'm guessing this was like federal money. Did the EPA have money committed that was taken back from you all? Like, what was that situation like?
No, we weren't that far, but what's called the WIFIA loans. And so it's basically for water infrastructure. And the EPA, it's an amazing program. Administrator Becker was actually in charge of it up until just a few months ago. And it was such a cool thing. They would give large scale loans at very low rates with very great repayment options to basically take care of large scale water projects that, again, water is not that sexy of a thing. And so it's not that easy to find money for it. So it was a wonderful program, and I hope it continues. But as of now, basically, it's been put on pause. So all the large-scale EPA opportunities like WIFIA and other loans like that, we're still going to chase down, absolutely. And we're going to go after every dollar we can before you ever go to a taxpayer to ask for a dollar, because we believe that the money is out there. And so that's what we want to chase down. So we've put in some letters of interest for loans like that. We've put in some inquiries. We've set on a bunch of calls to then learn as much as we possibly can. And right now, it's sort of everything's on the table laid out within the opportunity of the project. And once we know what the project looks like, we start to line those two things up. And where are these funding sources? What other funding sources could Denver have outside of this $5 million? What other funding sources could, again, Mile High Flood District and Dottie and others that are involved too?
I have to say, I was looking at real estate around the lake because I want to do. But you described
You
a
and me both,
very
Bree.
yeah. I feel like it's a pastime for us in Denver. You described a really beautiful neighborhood historically. I would not. I would hesitate that that's exactly what it looks like today. Obviously, there's a lot. I mean, houses a block off the lake are going for over $1 million. Are there some wealthy folks maybe in the neighborhood that could step up and help? I mean, have you heard from anybody in the neighborhood like that?
Yeah, our foundation is made up of several of those individuals, plus then lots of the community members who have been there their whole lives. And I think that's what's really neat about our organization. I will say that those folks get their phone calls returned, and we really appreciate their help and support for it. And it's been a faster movement since they have gotten involved and since they've helped out. I think we also take on that you never want to price people out of a neighborhood, and so that's also a challenge that I know that lots of regional planners are looking at. And how do we make sure that Sloan's Lake is still the great, vibrant cultural hub that it has been for a long time, including things like the Dragon Boat Festival being the largest cultural event in the greater Denver area with almost 200,000 people coming to it. So I think it's important to keep an eye on both things. But I think at some point, the businesses and the individuals around the lake understand that donations will be needed to make this happen. And these are not $5 and $10 donations. These are going to be much larger donations. So we're certainly poised for that down the road as well. What we like to say is that we want to have a plan in place ready to go that they can buy into instead of having to, basically sell a dream down the road. And so that some of that stuff will come as we move our project a little bit more forward. But again, so far we're not getting no's. We're getting, hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about it, or I love that lake. What can I do to help? And that's what's been so heartening and what's kept us going for the last several years we've been doing this work.
I think on the reverse of that, though, I'm wondering like Sloan's Lake, again, the surrounding neighborhood is fairly affluent at this point. Do you think that this project in turn could get a disproportionate amount of attention relative to other neighborhood needs across the city?
I would say not disproportionate amount in that watching the Park Hill project ongoing, I'd say that's something that we're still feeling, next in line behind. So I think that's one of those things that where we're not getting a disproportionate amount. I think West and Northwest Denver for a long time got a disproportionately low amount of influence, investment, and time and energy. Sloan's Lake was truly written off as a park for a lot of years throughout the middle of last century for Denver and did not get that maintenance that we talked about earlier, which was had we maybe done a little bit more in the 40s, 50s, 60s, this would not be a problem it is today. But that's not the time when we were looking at Sloan's Lake or West Denver as any sort of investment area. So I think it's time for West Denver, Northwest Denver to get some of this investment. Councilwoman Sandoval does a great job of speaking on this, which is, hey, lived here my whole life. And frankly, now that we are getting some attention, let's make sure we're doing the right things, not just maybe what some people are asking for. So that's why we think Sloan's Lake is one of those projects. It's for everyone of every income level, of every background, of every demographic, of every ability. It's the spot for all of us. And it's one of those projects we can all get behind and want to make sure it's still there. So I think let's say we're maybe due for some undue attention in a good way.
So I guess speaking to that population, I think anybody that grew up around there or just enjoy, like it's, like you said, it's the top 3 most used park. People come from all over the city and the state probably to utilize it. Is there something that folks could be doing right now to help or that they should be doing?
Absolutely. So first of all, get out and see the park. And I think that's one of those things to where lots of people have walked the rim of the lake, but have you ever walked up to the shoreline and looked in to see what's going on? We have an amazing video, and actually I'll share it, Bree, with you for your listeners. We've got a video of one of our board members walking out into the lake almost 100 feet, and he never goes past his ankles. Because again, you don't see what's right under the water level. You don't know what's going on there. Talk to some dragon boat individuals when they're out there practicing, or paddle boarders that are hitting their paddles on the bottom of the lake as they're making their way around, 'cause it's so shallow. So I think that's the first thing is maybe just get to know the spot if you don't know it. There's an amazing new playground that just opened on the south side. Again, Dragon Boat Festivals is September 5 or 6 and 7. Come on out and have some amazing food, watch some cultural dances, and then watch the dragon boats. So the first thing is just get out and enjoy it. Second thing though is you can't do enough of calling council and mayor's office and saying, I care about this lake. I want you to care about it too. That's not just to vote the vibrant bond in. It's also just the daily dollars that go into parks maintenance. Make sure it's coming over here to Sloan's Lake. Make sure they're having what their resources that they need. And then again, we made this an issue that got asked at every single one of the mayor's debates this past time around. That only came because our wonderful volunteers went to these debates, raised their hand, and asked the questions. So it's about them getting involved politically at that listen, we don't need to change the world. My one phone call does make a big difference, though. And so I think that's what we'd ask people to do now. Of course, we want you to sign up for, at sloanslakeparkfoundation.org, our email lists and our cleanups that we do monthly. We do education lake walks that talk about the history of the lake, all that, Roger the Elephant and the amusement park and all the fun stuff that's happened there. So we'll talk through all that, but it's a great way then we do talk about current day and issues and show what's going on in the lake too. So getting involved in that kind of stuff is important, but truly anytime you're around one of your elected officials of any level, and that would be state, federal, local, ask the question. If you live in Lakewood, Wheat Ridge, Edgewater, ask the question at a council meeting, what are we doing to help the Sloan's Lake challenges that's happening right now?
I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate you covering this issue, and thanks to everybody for listening about Sloan's Lake.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed the show, why not take a minute to tell your Sloan's Lake jogging buddy about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. See you later.
Bria, thing I should have mentioned, I forgot, but on the one shoreline, it looks like little black pebbles and black rocks called Black Rock Beach, so kind of what we call it. Those aren't black rocks. Those are sporting clays that have broken down over time because they used to shoot sporting clays over the lake.
What?
And so you can just pick it up and break them all. Like they're pieces of clay.
What?
So none of them are rocks. The entire beach, it's about 150 feet beach of little black rocks. That's all sporting clays that have washed up on the shore.
Oh my God.